Hello and welcome to Dojo Live this Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. My name is Kim Lantis and it's my pleasure to be hosting today. I'm very excited for a conversation because we're talking about the hidden challenge costing hotels billions every year. That is billions with a B. And here to tell us what that challenge is our guest, Jack O'Toole, founder and president of FreshAir Sensor. Thank you for joining us, Jack.
Hey, Kim, thank you very much for having me.
Yes, it's going to be a very, very fun conversation because we're talking about, I don't know how fun it is, but it's interesting. It's super interesting, very scientific, and very applicable conversation. But unauthorized smoking, right, is continuing to plague hotels. The question is, how much is it really costing your property? And we're going to dive into it. But before we do dive into that, Jack, I understand that you made a transition from leading special operations in the Marine Corps to founding Fresh Air Sensor. For me, that's quite a jump. I'm curious as to what kind of sparked your interest in improving air quality specifically for hotels, and how did that lead to the creation of Fresh Air Sensor?
Yeah, Kim, thank you. My first career was in special operations and specialized units in the Marine Corps. And when I decided to retire, I realized I didn't really know anything about the U.S. business culture. In my old job, we would do cultural immersion before we went places, and we'd
Mhm.
learn about their culture and we'd learn about how to interact and how to present yourself. And I realized that in the U.S. business culture, I didn't have any idea. I mean, I knew how to like jump out of planes, scuba dive, like shoot guns, drive cars, but I didn't really know how to be a business guy.
This is a fun conversation after all. This is super interesting. But yeah, business.
So, yeah, so I didn't know. So I went to business school at Tuck to do cultural immersion. I mean, I really did it just for that. And while I was at Tuck, I realized I was not well suited to getting a regular job. That I, spent too much time kind of working on my own to do that. So I started trying to come up with an idea for a scalable startup, something that was like really dispensable that could do like good, great stuff, make a difference, make people's lives better. And it turns out I'm not good at that. Like I did not come up with something like that. So then I developed this rubric for technologies, and I started looking at technologies that were being developed in the labs around where I was for something that would have a double bottom line, would help make people's lives better, would have a technology that did something other technologies couldn't do, and that's how I found Fresh Air. I got introduced to my partner, and he held up this like small thing which won't come through well in audio, and said all sorts of science words that I personally did not understand. But then he said he could detect nicotine, and he was that it was the only sensor that could detect airborne concentrations of nicotine. And I was like, wow. I used to travel 200 days a year, and there's a chain of hotels I refused to stay in because twice in a row I got rooms that were smoked up. And the second time I went down, I was mad. And I was like, hey, I'm not staying in this room. Like, you need to get me another room.
Mhm.
And the guy was like, look, man, stay in the room, stay in your car. I don't really care. But the Super Bowl's in town this weekend, and there's no possible way you're getting another room in this city.
Okay.
And I was mad, mad. So then when I heard about this technology from Joe, I was like, wow, I think chasing away guys that spend $30,000, $40,000 a year on hotel rooms, that's probably not good for business.
Probably not.
So there's probably like something we could do here. And this might sound strange, but I actually think my job now is pretty similar to my old job in that, like, I used to manage people that knew a lot more than I did about their very specific area. Right. I mean, there's like two or three things I can do pretty good in that field in special operations, but two or three things out of like 100 things or
Mhm.
100 things. But it's like that here at Fresh Air, right? Like everybody else here knows way more than I do about what they do. I mean, there's scientists and engineers, and I'm a guy that used to do raids for a job,
Right.
but I know how to manage people that know a lot more than I know.
I love it. And I think that's a very amazing leadership skills. And it sort of ties in, well, very well ties in to what we like to do at the end of Dojo Live. And that's talking about, these tips and ourselves as individuals, words of wisdom. And I love that, surrounding yourself by people who are really, really good at their jobs, who in a lot of ways are smarter than one. Um, but let's dive into this nicotine detection and this use case, this business case that you discovered out of your own need of like, I used to drop $30,000-$40,000 to this chain, not doing it anymore. Aha moment. Because as a non-smoker myself, I never really thought of smoking as being a major issue for hotels. Um, and I mean, I don't like it either in terms of staying in a room that has been smoked in. But I mean, the billions with a B, that cost just sort of never even occurred to me. And I'm curious if you could dive a bit more into how significant this challenge is, what the true cost of unauthorized smoking is, and not just in terms of money, right? But does this go beyond a financial loss in terms of, guest satisfaction, which then becomes money, but cleaning? I mean, let's dive into it. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was surprised at the scale of this problem because I mean, I certainly experienced it a lot of times. Like staying in hotels that often, you pretty frequently get a room that's smoked up. When I started digging into it, oh, and the other thing that stunned me when I started digging into it was I thought it was about tobacco smoking in hotels.
Mm-hmm.
And I started really digging into it. I quickly found out that people smoke marijuana in hotels at least as often as they smoke cigarettes and tobacco in hotels. So I mean, it's tobacco and marijuana.
You mentioned nicotine as what you're picking up. Is there
Yeah,
anything?
for tobacco. So when we started out, we had the sensor for nicotine, and
Okay.
then we developed a sensor to also detect a component, or a sensor to detect a component of burned marijuana. So we
I
have a
see.
specific component of burned marijuana we detect for marijuana,
All
and then
right.
nicotine for tobacco.
I get it. All right. So we've got cigarettes, we've got marijuana, which is, I guess, going to be increasingly complicated because it's increasingly more and more legal. And
Absolutely.
uh-huh. So
So
what's
the
what's
problem,
the cost?
as I
Yeah.
started digging into it, everybody kind of is aware that if somebody smokes in a hotel room, the hotel has to take it offline and clean it, right? And there's costs associated with that. What I found out, there's an interesting study out of California a few years ago that it said, I mean, they studied all these non-smoking hotel rooms, and they found that you can't really clean up after a smoking event unless you get rid of all the soft gear goods and then paint to encapsulate it. So if you don't do that, then there's this stuff called third hand smoke that's left behind.
Hmm.
That's the combination of the stuff that came off the cigarette and whatever it touches.
Okay.
And third hand smoke is actually more carcinogenic than second hand smoke.
Huh.
So that's not good. So if you go into a place and you're like, this place smells off, or it just smells like dirty, that is probably third hand smoke, and it's not good for you.
Typically, hotels are not switching out curtains and
No,
mattresses and none of that.
no. I mean, it's too much, right? The cost is crazy. So when we started looking at the costs, like what the problems are on a more day-to-day basis beyond the third hand smoke issue, we started finding that when a room is smoked in, um, it affects the person, like next person that stays in that room, but it also affects the people around them. So the lack of positive reviews, the negative reviews, the reduced intent to return, guest experience is predominantly driven. You can mess it up other ways, but the predominant driver of guest experience is cleanliness. And the predominant driver of cleanliness is smell. So even if you walk into a place and it looks fine, if it smells bad, and most bad smells are smoking related, it could also be it's musty because it's been damp, but most bad smells are smoking related. So that pretty dramatically affects intent to return and guest satisfaction.
Yeah, and all of this just kind of adds up, right, in terms of the money you lose because of dissatisfaction, not returning, increased cleans that you have to spend laundering, losing a night because the room's got to be deep cleaned, so you're not being able to book that room. So all of that just sort of snowballs and creates this billions with a
Yeah.
B. Now let's talk. We talked a little bit about the hardware, and you dove into this a little, some advanced molecular detection for both nicotine as well as marijuana components. But let's talk about the tech just a little bit and just
Absolutely.
how
How it
accurate is
works.
this?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we have the only technology that can monitor for and specifically detect tobacco smoke and marijuana smoke. We also have another sensor we invented, the only technology that can monitor for and specifically detect vaping. And what they are is it's called a molecularly imprinted polymer. I know that's a lot of big words, but it works like a biological receptor. It only mates with a specific target molecule. So there could be like whatever else you're spraying in that room, whatever else happens in that room doesn't impact the sensor. Only the specific molecule we're looking for changes the sensor. And then we also have, which gives it high sensitivity and high selectivity. We also have another sensor that looks for a specific chemical that indicates actual burning. So you'll see our sensor and the sensor that indicates burning, and they both perfectly go up together, and then they come back down at about, we'll call it a quarter of the rate that they go up after the smoking event's over.
Okay.
So when you see them, it's very, very clear. When we send a smoking alert, have scientific certainty that someone smoked.
Wow. Wow. And so there's this software component, so we can detect that someone smoked, is smoking. Then I guess the question is, now what, right? So my understanding is that you're offering more than just this amazing hardware, but there's this kind of robust software component to it. Um, and that interface is maybe helping hotels connect to an entire ecosystem. What does this look like in the what's the now what? Okay.
Yeah,
Somebody smoked.
absolutely. So for all clients, we immediately alert them when someone smokes, and then we provide them a chart that's scientific proof of smoking. But we also have integrations to top PMSs, and service optimization softwares. So for a lot of clients, you get a smoking alert, and it automatically charges the guest, and then it automatically sends the cleaners a notification that room 2314 has been smoked in and they need to deal with it. We also have options for communications to hook up with communications providers, so you
Mhm.
can automatically alert the guests that they're caught. And this is nice because typically if someone's bunkered down in their hotel room and smoking, they'll sit there and smoke a bunch of times. Um, Depending on what kind of property it is, we find that 7 to 10% of a normal hotel's rooms are smoked in every month, and in a casino hotel, it's more like
Mhm.
15 to 30% of their rooms
Wow.
are smoked in every month. But if you can stop it after one smoking, like you can get that cleaned up relatively quickly and turn that room over. It can be acceptable relatively quickly.
Yeah.
If somebody smokes like 5 or 10 cigarettes in a place, I mean, it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. And how do you I mean, this is a terrible way of thinking, but and I get it. Like 1 versus 10 is amazing, but do you have individuals who will then be like, "Well, I got caught, might as well keep going?" Or do we is the natural human nature to put on the brakes, or is it just to or is it charging per incident? Like how do you is am I making sense in my
Yeah, yeah,
question?
100%. Yeah, I mean, what we find with our clients is a lot of clients will charge the first time they catch someone, and then if someone smokes again, they kick them out.
Oh, okay.
Though we have other clients, we have another client who doesn't say anything to them until it's time for them to leave, and just charge them $500 every time they smoke. Like that feels a little unsportsmanlike to me, but
Yeah.
people like, whatever works best for the client. But typically we do see that if they go there and intervene, then that'll prevent further smoking.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if someone smokes, you charge them $500, and then you know that you have to deal with it after, and it's one cigarette. That's much less of an issue than if somebody smokes, sits in there all night watching
Yep.
whatever smoking.
Absolutely. And just even just the cleanup factor. Like it's proven and your team can come in and they can use the, I don't know, the correct chemicals, the correct, level of thoroughness. What's
Yeah,
the right word? That's necessary. So even in that, you're not just like relying on housekeeping coming in and going,
yeah.
maybe,
Well,
maybe
especially like if your housekeeper smokes, they might not know that somebody's.
immune. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They're like, "Oh,
absolutely.
she's totally fine in here," and then the next person comes in and they're mad.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any pushback? I mean, what we gain in the sense of the non-smoker satisfaction and the perception of cleanliness and rebookings, that outwins any of the potential negative pushback from smokers who are caught? Like,
Yeah,
is there?
yeah, absolutely. According to American Hotel Lodging Association, 87% of hotel guests want to be in completely non-smoking properties. So, I mean, are smokers
Vast
going to be
majority?
mad that they're held accountable for their actions? Yes. Like some smokers will be mad. But
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, like you said, the vast majority of people don't want to be exposed to that. And I mean, what's more important, the one smoker who is violating your rules or the, 9 people around them that didn't want to deal with that and now have to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what kind of feedback have you received from hotels who are using fresh air? Like, are there any success stories that you can share with us? How your solution has made a significant impact for them, for their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Hotels with a lot of repeat business, we typically see after the first year or within the first year a 50% reduction in smoking. I mean, we have hotels like larger properties that are capturing, $100,000 a month in cleaning fees. We have one large property that, as a pilot, partially implemented it, and they're getting 12 times as much in cleaning fees on floors with the devices as on the floors without devices. I mean, you would expect that there's about the same amount of smoking all over this one property.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in terms, is there other maybe KPIs or things that they're able to measure? Like, has their
And
scores
yeah, yeah,
on cleanliness or whatever kind of increased across the board, or what does that look like as well?
yeah, very much. You typically see a meaningful increase in net promoter score and intent to return. Like, because it's just cleaner, it's nicer, people are happier.
Yeah, I love it. And what's the setup look like for this? I mean, it quite simple for a hotelier in terms of just, the IoT side as well as the training on the software behind the scenes. What does this look like?
Yeah, very, very simple. So we work with the hotel ahead of time, and they give us, their Wi-Fi information and their room list, and then we pre-configure the devices.
Okay.
And when they go to install them, all they have to do is unscrew the wall plate, screw our locking wall plate in, and then plug the device in and snap it into lock it, and it's ready to go.
Wow.
Then our client experience team trains their team and helps them. Like the software is very, or the our page that they use, our desktop is very simple. They pop it up. It shows alerts. A lot of people, because it's easier for them, just use the email version of the alert. So they get an alert email to the desk. If they have it integrated with their PMS, and we have several different PMSs integrations available, then it just automatically goes into the person's folio.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's really simple, really easy. I mean, it's kind of on autopilot once you have the PMS integrated, especially if you have service optimization too. So, your housekeepers just get it pops up in their feed that they need to go deal with room 1847.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in terms of, earlier in the show, you mentioned this cultural awareness. Is there a certain type of training in that regard now with people being better prepared to actively engage with guests who have been caught smoking? Is that necessary? Is that like a bridge that still exists, the human to human, or are individuals prepared to have those types of conversations?
Absolutely. I mean, we give help hotels with our best practices that we've learned from other clients. We share with them how people generally do it, what works well. We also, later this month, will have a new offering coming out where if instead of dealing with complaints at the desk,
Mhm.
they can give the person the alert, and there's a place where the person can submit that alert to us for secondary review, and we'll have a scientist look at it and confirm that it's scientific proof of smoking, and then respond back to that guest. So you get that off the front desk. So they're not, because I mean, the reality is if you tell somebody that they're finally being held accountable for smoking in a hotel room, which they've probably done a lot of times, and they're going to have to pay $500, like they're going to be dissatisfied with that, right?
Of
They're
course.
not going to like that. So we think it's important to get that off the front desk, so the front desk representative isn't, getting yelled at by the angry person, and put a little distance between those two things.
Yeah, super, super smart. I was also, I had a question and then now it just escaped me. It'll come back. It'll come back. Forgive me. um, and it's not coming. It was a really good question too. I was so embarrassed by this. But yeah, I mean, the guest satisfaction, the need to sort of communicate that, and I love the fact that you're distancing. This was my question. Also, it comes to I'm assuming that warning. I mean, nearly every hotel room has a little plaque on the door somewhere that says this is a non-smoking room. If you smoke, you'll be charged XYZ. But is there now more visibility in that, like letting them know that there are highly sensitive sensors, or is it not spoken about at all? What type of um, visibility needs to, or do you take into account for that in terms of the pre-smoking?
Yeah, absolutely. Our clients, certainly, we share best practices with them. They'll do what they feel is best. A lot of clients now post or have little, period or whatever trifolds in the room or whatever,
Mhm.
saying that this room is monitored by an air quality monitoring system that will know if you smoked, and you'll be charged $500 if you're caught smoking. Most places now, when you sign the reg card, like one of the things you're signing off, it says that, I understand I'm not allowed to smoke in here. And if I do, the fine will be X.
Mhm.
So I think they do a pretty good job of informing people. And I think everybody knows now that, it's not really a shock when you find out you're not supposed to smoke in a hotel room today.
Yeah, definitely not. So, I mean, this is great. So, we've uncovered the costs, we've uncovered a very effective sensor that's quite accurate, that does a great job of distancing the smoker from the hotel employees at the start, then connecting this all the way through from charging to cleaning schedules. And we're talking about, use cases of seeing tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars of chargeback increases throughout the months and years, and of course, also increasing their net promoter scores on the cleanliness level. What's next? I mean, looking forward, what kind of trends do you foresee in air quality management, monitoring technology, specifically for the hospitality industry? But how might hotels better prepare for any future challenges? And maybe what are you looking forward to as Fresh Air Sensor?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's going to be more of this. I mean, we've seen people are much more concerned about this than in the past. Like when my wife and I first had children, if we wanted to go to a restaurant, we would be sitting 10 feet away from people smoking. And I mean, it was terrible. And nowadays, if my wife sees someone 100 yards away outside smoking, she's like, this is too much. We shouldn't be exposed to this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's pretty standard now. People just don't smoke, do not want to be exposed to it. And I think that's for more and more substances, right? Like we're talking, like people are talking a lot about PFAS, which isn't
Hmm.
airborne, but it's another substance that we weren't aware of 5 years ago. And now we're very, very concerned about.
I don't even know what that is. What is that?
They call it the forever chemicals. Like it
Huh.
actually has a lot of negative effects on physical development. So like babies and children and stuff. But I mean, they find it in pretty much every water source now.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, we keep learning new things and finding things that we need to be more thoughtful about, right? I mean, 50 years ago, the Cuyahoga River caught on fire in Cleveland. Now, and then like a couple of years ago, it got the River of the Year award.
Yeah.
We understand more and more what we have to keep track of. And at Fresh Air, I mean, we're scientists and engineers, not me, but everybody else is scientists and engineers. And we really are on the leading edge of that, looking at things that you need to be concerned about and then figuring out how to protect people from those things. And I think
Hmm.
hospitality and more broadly in our society, we'll see more and more of that. I think 50 years from now, there's things we do now that will horrify them.
Of course, of course. And I think you're right in the sense of this increasing trend to be concerned about our health, um, and in our homes, right, where we have control, but then that making that outward focus too of, if I'm traveling, if I'm somewhere that is not my home, liking to be able to have control and say so within a reasonable degree. And I think in terms of fresh air sensor, you're definitely on the right track. Let's bring it back to you, Jack, as an individual, as a leader. You mentioned one of the first things you did or continue to do is to surround yourself by the right individuals who are very good at what they do. What else have you learned in this entrepreneurship venture that you think might be some good advice for anyone else who's hoping to follow suit?
Yeah, I think especially in entrepreneurship, if you want to build something, there's 100 different skills that are required to build an organization and really grow it. And if you're pretty good, you might have three or four of those skills. So, I mean, while you need to keep learning more of those skills, you really, really need to find people that have different skills than you. I see a lot of people. My wife runs the Entrepreneurship Center at a business school, and a lot of people want to start companies with people like them.
Hmm.
And you really need people that are not like you and know things that you don't know and have skills you don't have. And then you need to be a good teammate and a good, work on building a team and having a culture where people can tell you the bad news and where you don't blame people, you just work on solutions. Like that really matters.
I love it. Don't blame people, work on solutions. I love it. And that's kind of actually the heart of what's going on behind fresh air sensor as well, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
it happens, we're going to find the solution. And I love the flexibility that you give your clients in the hotels too, in the sense of how they want to manage use cases. Are there hotels that choose not to do the charging at all and just use it in terms of knowing how to best clean?
Yeah, there's actually hotels that, because they care about managing the asset. And I wouldn't say
Mhm.
they do it just to best clean, but they do it so they can intervene. So if
Yeah,
somebody smokes, they can immediately address that issue and protect their other guests from being exposed to it.
yeah,
So, I mean, more luxury end properties like care about protecting the asset and protecting their other guests more than they care about the additional fees.
yeah. It's interesting, and I think that flexibility that you have built in terms of the types of alerts and the way that it's all connected throughout the ecosystem is just fantastic. Any final words of wisdoms that you'd like to share with our audience? And then, of course, how might they get a hold of you, Jack, to learn more about Fresh Air Sensor, um, and talk to your team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to monitor and get proof like this is incredibly important. I think there's other people that are saying they do this. I would be very careful about that. They cannot give you certainty that smoking took place. And I liken it to having birth control that works 90% of the time. That seems problematic. Uh,
Yeah.
if you'd like to talk to us more about it, we're at freshairsensor.com and we'd love to help you solve your problem.
All right, freshairsensor.com. Thank you so much, Jack, for your time today here on Dojo Live. It has been a pleasure, and wishing you and the Fresh Air Sensor team nothing but success as you move forward. Stick around for just a moment as we go off air. But before we do, I would like to remind the audience that we have one more show this week that's coming up tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific. That's going to be with Tim Flores of Groups 360. It's actually part one of a three-part series that we'll be having, and we're talking about revolutionizing group travel. We're going to be inside Group 360's vision for the future, understanding how technology is simplifying group travel and event travel, better results for both organizers and suppliers. So catch us tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific. Thank you once again, Jack, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.